The air on Xiphos 9 was thick, tinged with the acrid scent of metallic dust. The planet's twin suns hung low in the sky, bathing the alien terrain in a burnt orange glow. A jagged fortress loomed ahead, its spiked architecture a silent warning. Humanity was not welcome here. Dr. Sienna Carter adjusted her scanner, frowning at the readout. The atmospheric composition was borderline toxic, but that wasn't what unsettled her. It was a KR Star Dominion. Warriors built like walking tanks, clad in iridescent battle plates, who viewed negotiation as a quaint weakness. "I still say this is a bad idea," murmured Corporal Diego Vasquez, shifting his weight from foot to foot. He tapped a gloved finger against his holstered sidearm. "You ever try reasoning with a crocodile? Now imagine the crocodile is 9 feet tall, wields a plasma cannon, and has anger issues." "We don't have a choice," Captain Elias Carter said, his voice even. He stood a few feet ahead, every inch the seasoned strategist. His stance was calm but coiled, like a man who never stopped calculating his next 3 moves. "We need the KR Star to stand down, or this war escalates." Sienna stole a glance at her husband. Elias wasn't just a military man. He was a survivor, a tactician who could make a victory out of scraps. She had lost count of the times he had turned hopeless scenarios into wins. But even he couldn't outplan raw hostility. A step behind them, Ava Nakamura, the team's linguist and anthropologist, adjusted the hollow tablet cradled in her arms. "The KR Star respects strength," she said. "If we present ourselves as equals, they might reconsider their stance." "Or eat us," Dee muttered. The massive KR Star gates groaned open, revealing a grand hall lined with brutalist ironwork. Warlord Exrovok stood at its center, exuding authority. His hulking form was clad in ceremonial battle armor, the deep scars across his ridged snout a testament to his many victories. He regarded them with something between amusement and disdain. "So these are the humans," he rumbled. "You are smaller than I expected." Sienna's fingers twitched, but she kept her expression neutral. Elias stepped forward. "We come as representatives of the Terran Coalition," he said. "Our goal is to establish diplomatic." Exrovok laughed, the sound reverberating through the hall. "Spare me your human games. You have no claim to strength. Your kind builds fragile machines, hides behind clever tricks. You do not belong among warriors." Ava opened her mouth to interject, but Exrovok's gaze flicked to Sienna. "And this is one of your scientists." He sneered the word. "You send me a builder instead of fighter? What use is such a creature?" Sienna's jaw clenched. She could tolerate insults. She had faced plenty of skeptical commanders who dismissed her expertise, right up until she saved their hides with an invention they never saw coming. But this was different. Exrovok stepped closer, his massive frame casting a shadow over her. "I could crush you with one hand," he said, his voice almost lazy. "Would your kind mourn you, or simply manufacture another?" The room stilled. Sienna exhaled, slow and controlled. Then, with the detached calm of an engineer discussing circuitry, she said, "You could try." Elias shifted, subtle but deliberate. A warning. Exrovok's eyes narrowed. Then, in a blur of movement, he struck. The back of his armored hand lashed out, aiming to swat her like an insect. But Sienna had already moved. She ducked under the blow, shifting her weight to roll back onto her feet. She wasn't a soldier, but she had learned enough from Elias to know that speed beats power. Exrovok barely looked impressed. Fast, but pointless. Sienna ignored him. She had already calculated the details. Impact velocity, striking angles, material stress limits. The KR Star armor was strong, but not invincible. She spotted the weak point near his gauntlet joint and made a mental note. "Fascinating," Ava muttered, half to herself. "They rely so much on physical dominance. They don't expect resistance from someone not built like them." Exrovok rumbled something in his native tongue, likely an insult, then turned to Elias. "Tell me, human warrior, does it shame you that your mate is the bold one?" Elias smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "Oh, I'm very proud of her," he said. Then, before Exrovok could react, Elias closed the distance between them and stepped on his foot. Hard. The warlord snarled, caught off guard for just a fraction of a second, and that was all Sienna needed. With a flick of her wrist, she palmed a compact pulse emitter, one of her personal designs, and jammed against the unarmored seaman Exrovak's gauntlet. A crackling burst of energy surged through the warlord's limb, forcing his muscles to seize. Exrovak stumbled back, momentarily stunned. Silence blanketed the hall. Sienna flipped the emitter in her hand, exhaling. Not so fragile now, am I? Dee whistled low. Remind me never to piss you off. But Exrovak recovered fast. His stunned expression twisted into something else, anger. A challenge had been issued, and the KR Star never let a challenge go unanswered. He roared, a guttural sound that sent every KR Star warrior in the room reaching for weapons. Elias reacted instantly. Time to go. Ava was already moving, grabbing Sienna's arm and pulling her toward the exit. Dee yanked a smoke charge from his belt and lobbed it into the air. It exploded in a burst of thick, purple vapor, buying them precious seconds. They sprinted through the halls, their exit meticulously planned, but their ship was already compromised. Through the open gates, they saw Karstar shock troopers cutting off their path, energy rifles aimed. Plan B? Sienna asked. Elias scanned their surroundings, his mind racing. We go dark, into the wilderness. Ava hesitated. The report said the terrain outside the city is uncharted. No maps, no settlements. Dee grinned. Then they won't know where to find us either. Exrovak's enraged voice echoed behind them. Hunt them down. Bring me their heads. The team bolted into the unknown. The game had changed. The KR Star thought humans were fragile. Now, they would learn what happened when you cornered the most adaptable species in the galaxy. The wilderness of Xiphos, 9 was an unforgiving expanse of jagged rock formations, acidic mist, and bioluminescent fungi that pulsed faintly in the dim twilight. The terrain was alien in every sense, sharp, shifting, and utterly indifferent to the survival of its visitors. Sienna wiped sweat from her brow and adjusted the settings on her wrist scanner. Atmosphere is getting worse. Pockets of sulfur dioxide in the air. We'll need filtration masks soon. Elias Carter led the group forward, his keen eyes scanning for threats. The KR Star wouldn't give up easily. They were hunters by nature, and right now, humans were their prey. Behind them, D. Vasquez grumbled as he kicked a loose stone down a ravine. You'd think with all the fancy alien tech out there, someone would have invented a breathable atmosphere. Technically, we did, Ava Nakamura said, adjusting the straps on her gear. It's called not coming to inhospitable planets in the first place. Sienna barely heard them. She was too focused on the readout in front of her, a map of their immediate surroundings, hastily cobbled together using the KR Star signals she'd hacked earlier. The bad news? They were boxed in by cliffs on 2 sides, with KR Star search parties closing in from the third. The good news? They weren't dead yet. Elias glanced over her shoulder. How long until they reach us? Less than an hour, she said. They're scanning for heat signatures, which means we need to block ours. Wonderful, Dee drawled. Anybody got a spare invisibility cloak? Ava perked up. Actually, there's an old Karstar myth about the Jalari, a species that supposedly survived by blending into the environment. If they exist, they might know a way to... Yeah, cryptid aliens, cool story, Dee interrupted. Unless one's about to hand us a survival guide, I'm thinking we need a faster solution. Sienna exhaled sharply, thinking. Heat signatures. Camouflage. Disruption. Then it hit her. I've got an idea, she said, already kneeling and pulling open her satchel. She yanked out 2 power cells, a multi-tool, and a coil of insulated wiring. I can rig an emitter to scramble our thermal signatures. Dee peered over her shoulder. That sounds made up. It is made up, Sienna shot back. I'm making it up right now. That's called engineering. Elias smirked. That's my wife. Ava crouched beside them, eyes flicking between components. Will it be strong enough to cover all of us? Sienna frowned. If I had an hour? Sure, but I've got 20 minutes, so we'll have to hope the Karstar aren't using high-grade sensors. Hope? Dee said, stretching the word. That's comforting. But no one stopped her. They knew better. The hunt begins. 15 minutes later, the device was as ready as it was ever going to be. It was a crude thermal disruptor, little more than a hacked-together energy modulator powered by scavenged cells. Sienna pressed the activation switch, and a soft hum pulsed through the air. The temperature around them dropped a few degrees as the device projected an interference field. Elias checked the scanner. Their nearest patrol is closing in. We need to move. They slipped into the rocky terrain, moving carefully. The disruptor wouldn't make them invisible. It would just muddy their heat signatures enough to buy them time. The first sign of the Karstar was a sound. A low, guttural clicking echoed through the cliffs, followed by the rhythmic thump-thump of heavy boots. The Karstar didn't sneak. They didn't need to. Sienna's grip tightened around the disruptor. If it failed now, through the mist, shadows moved. 2 Karstar warriors, towering figures in gleaming battle armor, sweeping the terrain with handheld scanners. Elias signaled for everyone to freeze. The warriors paused, their scanners flickering in the dim light. One of them grunted something in his native tongue. The other responded with a sharp snarl. Seconds stretched into eternity. Then, just as suddenly as they had appeared, the Karstar moved on. Ava let out a slow breath. It worked. Sienna allowed herself a moment of relief, but only a moment. They'll recalibrate their scanners eventually. We need a better hiding place. Elias nodded. Let's find one. An unlikely ally. They moved deeper into terrain, navigating the treacherous landscape until they stumbled upon something unexpected. A cavern entrance, half hidden behind a cluster of luminescent vines. Faint markings lined the stone, a language that wasn't Karstar. Ava's eyes widened. This is it. The Jalari. Dee arched a brow. You mean the invisible cryptid aliens? Those Jalari. Sienna studied the markings. Looks like an old settlement. If there's anyone still here, we might be able to... A sharp chittering noise cut through the air. A shape detached in the shadows, tall, slender, cloaked in refractive light. It moved like a whisper, its form shifting as if the very air bent around it. A Jalari. Ava's breath hitched. It's real. The figure regarded them for a long moment before speaking. Its voice was soft but layered, like multiple tones stacked atop one another. Humans, it said. Not a question. A statement. Elias met its gaze. We need help. The Jalari was silent. Then it tilted its head toward the approaching Karstar patrols. They hunt you? Sienna's pulse quickened. Yes. A flicker of something, amusement, passed through the Jalari's shifting features. They always hunt, it murmured. Then, stepping back into the darkness, it gestured. Come. Elias hesitated only for a second before following. The others moved quickly behind him. As they slipped into the cavern's depths, the sounds of Karstar warriors grew distant. For now, they had vanished. But Sienna knew it wouldn't last. The Karstar thought they were still prey. They were about to learn otherwise. The cavern walls pulsed with a faint, bioluminescent glow, casting shifting shadows across the jagged rock formations. The air was cool and dense with an earthy scent. Strange, yet oddly comforting. Sienna kept close to Elias, resisting the urge to check her scanner. Every instinct screamed that they should be on the move. But for now, they had no choice but to trust their enigmatic Jalari guide. The alien moved fluidly, its form shifting in and out of visibility like a mirage. It had no eyes, at least none that were visible, but it navigated the terrain with absolute confidence. This place is ancient, Ava Nakamura whispered, trailing a hand along the walls, where delicate carvings wove together in intricate, interlocking patterns. The Jalari were here long before the Karstar. Yeah, D. Vasquez muttered, adjusting his grip on his weapon. Then where are they now? The Jalari halted. Hiding, it said simply. Elias narrowed his eyes. From the Karstar? The alien gave a low, melodic hum, as if considering. From many things. Sienna wasn't sure whether that answer was better or worse. The path led into a vast underground chamber, where natural crystalline formations refracted dim light in a kaleidoscope of colors. Small structures, woven from organic material, lined the far walls, and more figures emerged from the darkness, their bodies shifting in a way that made them blend almost seamlessly with their surroundings. The Jalari were still here. Ava exhaled in awe. This is incredible. The Karstar must have thought they wiped them out, but instead... They adapted, Sienna finished. The Jalari who had led them gestured toward a central platform. You seek to evade your hunters. You are not the first. Elias stepped forward. You helped others before us? Some, the Jalari said. Most did not listen. Sienna exchanged glances with Elias. Listen to what? The Jalari's form rippled, its outline shifting. Survival is not won by strength. It is won by the unseen. Ava's eyes widened in realization. That's how you've lived. You don't just hide. You move in ways that make you impossible to track. Adaptation, Sienna murmured, her mind racing. You alter your movements, your patterns, even your heat signatures. The Jalari inclined its head. The Karstar are powerful, predictable. They believe only in what they see. Elias exhaled slowly. Then let's make sure they see the wrong thing. A plan takes shape. Over the next 3 hours, the team absorbed everything they could. The Jalari didn't rely on cloaking devices or brute force. Their survival was based on misdirection, deception, and calculated unpredictability. Sienna worked quickly, modifying their thermal disruptor, using insights from Jalari technology. With a few adjustments, it could not only mask their heat signatures but project false ones, making it appear as though they were somewhere they weren't. Dee tested the results by tossing a small sensor drone into the air. When he checked the readings, his eyes widened. Damn. According to this, I'm standing 20 meters to the left. Sienna smirked. Good. Now let's see if it fools the Karstar. Luring the hunters. When they emerged from the cavern, night had fallen over Xiphos 9. The twin suns had dipped below the jagged horizon, leaving only the eerie glow of distant fungi and the harsh floodlights of Karstar patrol ships in the distance. The hunt had not stopped. If anything, it had intensified. Elias activated his comm. We split into 2 teams. Sienna and Ava. You'll stay hidden and control the disruptor. Dee, and I will draw them in. Dee grinned. Finally, a chance to piss off some aliens on purpose. Sienna handed Elias a secondary device. This will let you trigger heat bursts in random locations. It should confuse their scanners long enough for us to slip past. Elias met her gaze. You sure you'll be okay? Sienna smiled. You do remember who you married, right? Elias chuckled, squeezing her hand briefly before moving into position with Dee. Ava tapped a command on her holo tablet, and the disruptor hummed to life. Almost instantly, Fall's readings flickered across the Karstar scanners, showing phantom human heat signatures sprinting in different directions. The reaction was immediate. Karstar patrols turned sharply, roaring orders to each other as they split off to chase the fabricated signals. From their hiding spot, Sienna whispered, That's right, you dumb lizards. Follow the ghosts. The trap is sprung. The plan was working. The Karstar, so convinced of their own dominance, had no instinct for deception. They pursued the phantom signals with relentless aggression, leaving key areas unguarded. Elias and Dee moved swiftly through the chaos, planning disruptor nodes that would continue feeding false data long after they were gone. Every step was calculated, every movement designed to reinforce the illusion. Then, just as they were about to regroup, a deep, guttural growl cut through the air. Elias turned sharply. A Karstar enforcer loomed ahead, larger than the others. It wasn't looking at a scanner. It was tracking them by instinct. It had seen through the deception. Elias barely had time to react before the enforcer lunged. He twisted, narrowly avoiding the massive clawed hand that tore through the air where his head had been. Dee fired, his shots ricocheting off the enforcer's armor. Yeah, so bad news, Dee said between blasts. This one's not an idiot. The enforcer swung again, but this time, a sharp whistle rang out. In a blur of motion, a Jalari warrior dropped from the cliffs above, landing silently behind the Karstar enforcer. It moved like liquid shadow, its form rippling, and then, without warning, it plunged a shimmering blade into the enforcer's exposed flank. The KR star roared in agony, stumbling back as its blood, dark and viscous, splattered onto the rocky ground. Elias didn't hesitate. Move. Now! Dee needed no encouragement. They bolted, leaving the Jalari to finish the fight as they sprinted toward the rendezvous, the turning point. By the time they reached the extraction point, Sienna and Ava had the final disruptor nodes online. Sienna checked the scanners. The patrols are still chasing our phantom signals. We've got a window. Elias caught his breath. Then let's make sure this ends on our terms. As the first KR Star dropship moved into position, Sienna activated the final sequence, one that would overload every enemy scanner in the region, flooding them with false readings. The result was instant chaos. KR Star officers bellowed in confusion as their instruments lit up with hundreds of non-existent targets. It wasn't just misdirection anymore. It was complete battlefield blindness. Elias grinned. Looks like the hunters just lost their prey. Sienna smirked. Correction. They just became ours. The KR Star dropships hovered over the jagged cliffs of Xiphos 9, their floodlights slicing through the darkness like searchlights in a storm. But beneath that artificial glare, their enemies, Sienna, Elias, Dee, Ava, and the Jalari, moved unseen. The final phase of their plan had begun. Elias adjusted his grip on his pulse rifle, keeping low behind a ridge as he scanned the KR Star formations. Their warriors were scattered, their patrol routes erratic. The thermal disruptors had done their job. What should have been a disciplined hunting force was now a chaotic, disoriented mess, chasing ghosts across the landscape. This is almost sad to watch, Dee whispered, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. Almost. Sienna, crouched beside him, tapped rapidly on her hollow tablet. Give 'em a minute. It's about to get worse for them. Ava kept her eyes on the Jalari beside her. The alien warrior stood motionless, its form shifting subtly to match the environment. Are they ready? She asked. The Jalari leader, known only as Vale, gave a slow nod. The KR Star do not fear what they cannot see. That is their weakness. Elias exhaled sharply. Then it's time to remind them who the real predators are. Turning the hunt around, Sienna activated the final override. The disruptors flared, sending out waves of interference that blanketed the region in a flickering storm of false signals. Suddenly, every KR Star scanner overloaded, flashing hundreds of conflicting alerts. On the KR Star comms, snarls of confusion and rage erupted. Sector 7, heat signatures. No, wait, it's shifting. We're surrounded. Multiple life signs approaching. Negative. Those aren't real. Ignore the... Too late. The moment hesitation fractured their ranks. The Jalari struck. They moved like phantoms, darting from the shadows, their refractive bodies blending seamlessly with the terrain. KR Star warriors barely had time to react before razor-thin blades found their way past their armor, slicing through weak points with precision honed over centuries of survival. Elias and Dee fired in tandem, taking down the larger enforcers before they could rally. Ava threw a sonic grenade, disorienting a squad long enough for Vale to slice through them like mist on the wind. Sienna stayed focused on her tablet, feeding false retreat orders into the KR Star comms. In the chaos, some units actually obeyed, falling back toward an extraction point that didn't exist. This is working. Ava breathed, hardly believing it. Dee grinned. Told you we should piss them off more often. The commander arrives. Then the real threat arrived. A new dropship descended. Sleek, predatory, bristling with weapons. It wasn't just another patrol. It was a command vessel. Elias recognized the sigil etched into its hull. Commander Zalvor, a brutal KR Star tactician, infamous for turning ambushes into bloodbaths. The moment his ship touched down, the tide of battle shifted. A voice, guttural and dripping with contempt, boomed across the comms. Humans, Zalvor sneered. You scurry in the dark like vermin, playing tricks. But tricks do not win wars. Sienna's blood ran cold. Zalvor had shut down his own scanners. He wasn't relying on tech anymore. He was relying on instinct. The final stand. KR Star forces regrouped with ruthless precision, forcing the Jalari and the humans into a defensive retreat. Vale hissed, his form shimmering with tension. This one is different. Elias gritted his teeth. Yeah, we notice. A thunderous impact shook the cliffs as Zalvor himself emerged, standing nearly 8 feet tall, his armor adorned with battle trophies from conquered species. In one massive clawed hand, he gripped a plasma halberd, its energy crackling like restrained lightning. I grow tired of this, he snarled. No more tricks. No more illusions. Face me, human. Elias exhaled. He knew what Zalvor was doing, calling him out, forcing a direct fight. The smart move was to keep running, to keep hiding. But humans weren't just smart. They were stubborn as hell. Elias stepped forward. You want to fight? Fine, but let's make it interesting. He tossed his rifle aside. Zalvor's mandibles spread in a predatory grin. Brave. Foolish. I will enjoy this. What the KR Star commander didn't realize was that Sienna was already rewriting the battlefield behind him. While he focused on Elias, she fed a new set of commands into the KR Star warship systems. Zalvor lunged. Elias dodged, barely avoiding a plasma arc that melted the ground where he had stood. He countered with a strike of his own, but it was like punching solid steel. Zalvor grabbed him by the throat, lifted him off the ground. You are weak, he growled. Elias smirked. No, I'm human. And that's when Sienna hacked the dropship's weapons. The ship's plasma cannons turned inward, targeting the KR Star forces instead. Explosions ripped through the enemy ranks, obliterating entire squads before they could react. Zalvor roared in fury, dropping Elias just as a secondary sonic pulse from Ava disoriented him. D seized a moment, firing a rail shot directly at Zalvor's shoulder joint. The round punched through his armor, sending the KR Star staggering backward. Vale moved in with unnatural speed, his blade finding the gap in Zalvor's defenses. The KR Star commander snarled in pain, barely managing to deflect the killing blow. He looked at Elias, at Sienna, at the Jalari surrounding him. He saw not prey but predators. For the first time, he hesitated. Elias smirked. Still think tricks don't win wars? The end of the hunt. The surviving KR Star, scattered leaderless, outmaneuvered, fled. Zalvor snarled a final curse before activating his personal teleport beacon, vanishing in a burst of crackling energy. The battlefield fell silent. Dee let out a slow breath. Tell me someone recorded that. Ava grinned. Oh, I got all of it. Sienna turned to Vale. Will your people be safe now? The Jalari studied her for a long moment, then inclined his head. For the first time in many cycles, yes. Elias looked at his team, bruised, battered, but alive. Victorious. He turned to Sienna, grinning. So dinner after this? She laughed. You're buying. As they walked away, the KR Star hunt was over. But humanity? They had only just begun.